Council, we're ready to resume this.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, we now have representatives of the Victorian Aboriginal Education Association, or VAI, present to give evidence before the Commission. We have Aunty Geraldine Atkinson, Uncle Lionel Bamblett, and Dr. Mark Rose is joining us online from the United States. If I can first invite you, Aunty Jerry, to introduce yourself in whatever cultural way that you feel is appropriate to the Commissioners.
I'm really not sure, but culturally, I wished I could say, in Bangarang language, thank you very much for having us, but I can't. Lost my language, don't have it. My mother didn't teach it, so.
They stole it.
It was stolen, but it was sleeping, but it's being revived. But young people reviving it. Okay, so I just wanted to say, what I would like to do, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners of the land. I want to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and I just acknowledge how hard those old people worked. But how they worked, that little piece of land that they only ended up getting, and fighting really hard for it. And I think they were, it was something that I always remembered reading about, and I just really pay my respects to them, their elders. And I want to pay my respects to my elders in the room and those that are joining on live stream. I want to thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to present here today and to discuss our submission to the Yoorrook Commission. In our submission, we outlined how the history of the education system in Victoria has impacted and shaped career learners historically, and the efforts towards remediation and reconciliation VAI have engaged in. So VAI's core mission has always been to ensure that career learners have the opportunities and support they need to reach their full potential, their academic potential, and to achieve their educational aspirations. VAI views the education system as a key mechanism for enacting self-determination, both within and beyond the classroom. And as such, we at VAI have adopted an expansive view of education as a lifelong process that serves to strengthen the capacity of our career learners, their families and their communities. You probably heard, and you've probably heard lots of submissions and lots of people talked about it, but there can be no doubt that the historical colonial practices that were in place at the founding of Victoria's education system have left a long-lasting legacy on career culture and our social structures. And unfortunately, we continue to see the remnants of these practices from episodes of racism, exclusion, segregation that placed our career learners at an unfair disadvantage. Since its beginning, VAI has worked consistently to create equity and fairness within the education system. Since our inception, the Victorian career community has seen increased career representation within the education and training sector, creating positive reflections of our career learners' achievements, demonstrating to future students that what they can achieve also. Today, we're going to discuss both the good and the bad. It's important to acknowledge the long journey that we've walked as a community, as career people, and more generally, the hardships of our past have provided strength of our future, and we continue to strive to create a just and equal system where Aboriginal knowledges can be freely shared and appreciated. And it's important for this Commission to understand that the true historical record and the harms that have been done to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Documenting and detailing these injustices is critical for reconciliation and remediation. However, it's also important for this Commission to hear the hard work that we at VAI have done and continue to do to create a positive and culturally responsive and safe future for our career learners in all education and training institutions in Victoria. So we at VAI have worked with the Victorian Government since 1976 to ensure that there is a career voice at the table, that the career community has their say in educational decision making. We have a partnership that has enabled us to empower students, families and their communities to participate fully in the education system so that they reap the benefits of educational attainment. VAI has done this through the policy of YALCA, education training for a new millennium, which has led to two key strategies. So in Warwick and most recently, the Worawa Aboriginal Education Plan 2016 to 2026. VAI believes that the Yoorrook Commission is well placed to strengthen career participation across all critical systems. So that's including health, justice, welfare and education, thus allowing our communities to have increased participation in these institutions to embed Aboriginal perspectives such as cultural and spiritual practices which are going to benefit all Victorians now and into the future. I just want to say once again, we are grateful for this opportunity and thank you, Commissioners, for your dedication and your commitment to striving to improve outcomes for our career communities across Victoria. I just wanted to talk a little bit about myself. I'm a proud Bangarang, Wiradjuri woman. My mother was born on Camargunja Mission. My father was born on Warringasta Mission in New South Wales. They actually met at a dance at Camargunja, fell in love and had 14 children. I became president of VAI since 1999 and I've always been passionate about career education. And I've been working in education for over 40 years. I first worked as a teacher aide, an Aboriginal teacher aide. This program was established by Aboriginal Education Services, and there were two very important men in positions that enabled us to go on and improve and strengthen what we've done. And that was Glenn Beaton and Colin Burke. I just wanted to acknowledge those two men. They were two that when I first started my work as a teacher aide, because I firmly believed in education and that it supported me along that way and along that journey. I believe education is a key for empowering the next generation and breaking the poverty cycle. I'm proud of the work that we've achieved at VAI, advocating for our community, developing and driving key policies and strategies, including, as I mentioned earlier, Warwick and Worawa, that have shaped and influenced Aboriginal education in Victoria, leading to significant improvements in educational outcomes for the career community. My passion, my passion is education. But one of the things, and I not alone, but I had supports with me, and I had my family supports and a very good advocate in my sister and my sisters. We believed that what we needed to do was ensure that if we were going to improve education outcomes in this state, and we had to start at the earliest beginnings. And we believed that early childhood education was the first building block towards improving education for our children in Victoria. So I continue, and I wanted to let you know that I continue to work hands-on to this day at Lulla's Children and Family Centre, which we started in 1986, which was called Lidgie. We developed a kindergarten called Butcher, and we started a school within a school for Aboriginal students called Marniga. We co-located Lidgie and Butcher, and we called it Lulla after my mother. It was called Lulla after my mother, who was so instrumental in helping so many children that I believe she deserved that accolade. We wanted to make a culturally safe and a nurturing educational environment for our children, for our babies. And I just wanted to say that it has been one of the most worthwhile things that I believe that we've been able to achieve. And it's grown. It not only grew there, it's grown throughout Victoria, and I'm really, really proud of that. Also, as you know, I recently, from 2019 until 2023, I served as the co-chair of First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. I don't know who wrote this little bit of a bio for me, put that in, but there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Aunty Jerry. And do you undertake to tell the truth to the Commission today?
I do.
Uncle Lionel, what's your role at VAI?
Can I interrupt that?
Yes,
Can
of
we
course.
introduce Mark Rose? He's the Vice President of our organisation. So in that sort of stream,
Yeah, of course.
he'd come next.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, if you could introduce yourself to the Commissioners and your role at VAI and anything else that you want to add following Aunty Jerry's opening.
Thanks, Tim and Lionel, for that. I'm Mark Rose. I'm a Gunda Jamara man with family ties to the Eastern Bar Group and the Gunda Bearing Group. My day job is Pro Vice Chancellor of Indigenous Strategy and Innovation at Deakin, but I'm really proud to say that I've been at VAI. This is my 29th year on the Committee of Management or the VRC at VAI, and in that time, I'd like to say that I've learned more about education than I have from my 4 academic degrees combined. There's people like Lionel and Geraldine, and the aunts at the table, Aunty Mary, Aunty Laura, Aunty Melba, Aunty Rose. Their training of me in education has been so pronounced. So, but Tim, if it's okay with you, I'd like to acknowledge country, and I'm a long way off country at the moment, so I acknowledge that you are on land of the Wurundjeri people and pay respect, of course. And I declare that I bring the spirit of my ancestors and the wisdom and compliments of my elders to this gathering today. I'm on the colonial labelled place called Boston, and I want to recognise the Massachusetts tribe to the east, the Nipmuc tribe, and to the south, the Wampan or the Mashpee tribe. And in the way they acknowledge country over here is they don't use the word unceded, they use the word occupied. So I'm on the occupied lands of those 3 tribes, and in doing that, say that I've come with respect to share knowledge.
Thank you very much, Mark. And then Uncle Lionel, if you wanted to introduce yourself to the Commissioners and respond in any way that you want.
Thank you. Look, as stated, my name is Lionel Bamblett. I'm the General Manager of VAI. I'm a proud Wiradjuri Yorta Bannerang man. I'm the General Manager of VAI. I think I just said that, didn't I? Yeah, I did. I have worked for our community in education for over 30 years, providing advice to successive governments in Victoria on the ways to improve education and training opportunities for our Koori community. I've been fortunate enough to advocate and represent our Victorian Koori community in Indigenous education and training issues at a local, state and national level, and sometimes international. I'm proud of the foundations we have created from a small group of parents and community members to an organisation of 46 staff, and I think that's slightly got larger, and 32 LACGs, which is the most important component. That's our local community voice network across Victoria. seeing VAI recognised as a peak body for Koori education and training in Victoria and as an equal partner with the Victorian government in Koori education since 1990. We have worked hard to develop key policies and strategies, including Yalka, Waraka and Marung. Waraka is a strategy in the TAFE adult education area and also covers higher education. And Marung, that ensures our mob get a seat at the table and a voice in education and training space. And that's vital. And having our community's voice at the table, having our community's voice inputs into the planning matrix of what is delivered in regards to education and training for everyone, not just for our own, but for everyone. All right? In 2023, I was fortunate to be, I didn't want to write this, but never mind. Fortunate to be awarded an honorary doctorate from Deakin University in recognition of my work and dedication for Koori education in Victoria. But also that's an honour, not only just in there. I mean, I've been on several and multiple national committees in education and training across the country. And it's been a real honour to represent our community's voice in those processes, but also taking forward not only my own personal view, but taking forward our community's voice in that matrix. And so when I was talking about those 32 LACGs, that's the basis for where we develop our strategies going forward and gathering the community's knowledge and voice back into the matrix and back into planning and the way forward in education and training. All right. And we've got to look at the journey, and I'll cover that later, but the journeys that we've achieved in education from since we were incorporated, or since the inception really. And I've got to pay acknowledgement to late Professor Colin Burke and late Mary Atkinson, who were the forerunners as the chairs and co-chairs of VAECG, which actually led to the formation of VAI, right? And where we become incorporated in 1985.
Yes.
85. And from that day, in 1985, when we were incorporated, we had 2 Year 12 graduates in the state of Victoria. 2, right? We've now moved to the point where nearly 700 are finishing Year 12, but still a long way to go, folks. Still a long way to go. I think I jumped the gun here a little bit. I have, that's okay. But it's also, I'll throw back to Geraldine.
Actually, Lionel actually stole my lines. I'm going to tell you that.
That's all right.
But that's okay. That's fine because he's part of the journey. What he says is right. We were established in 1985 as the Victorian Aboriginal Education Association Incorporated, as VAI, which was one of the reasons that we were able to. And in those days, you had to become an incorporation to receive government funding, and that's why we moved from the VAECG to VAI, and that was a really important because we were able to receive that funding to become established. We were established as a VAECG in 1976. There was a small group of parents, and I can remember Colin travelling across the state. Professor Colin Burke, who was just so important and vital to the work of VAI, and getting parents together and talking to parents and getting them interested in what they would see as being better for, for a better education system for their children. And he was, and I always remember he actually, when he'd met up with Mary, and he met, this really feisty woman that had her say and had to have her say, and who would stand up and say to the principals and to government people and everyone else about what, sort of the things that really stuck with him. He said, I can remember this woman telling this story about how she had to go and meet a principal, and her heart was thumping beating in her chest. This was Colin telling the story. Beating in her chest, and she was scared to talk to him, but it was about what she wanted for her daughter. But you know what? She stood up and she did it. And it was a story that he really loved telling. So about Mary, and they were, as Lionel mentioned, the two early co-leaders of that formation that aimed to increase career involvement in education with decision making. So that went on to enable, you know, more crew members to participate, to continue the journey with us in shaping that education provision for career students. So, as Lionel said, you know, the VAECG, it was about advocacy for holistic education and training. And we did realise that it had to be important from early childhood service to post-compulsory education and training. And the VAECG advocated for education that recognised and reflected the career community. So VAECG worked tirelessly to ensure that the career community's right to be actively involved in decisions about their education for their children. And as Lionel said, before we became VAI in 1985, and we were so very proud that that work and that advocacy that had taken place about, you know, the work that Colin and those people that did work across Victoria about bringing people together, that we were able to form those 32 Aboriginal education consultative groups. And what we wanted and what they wanted to know and what they wanted to hear was what was happening in their communities in education for their children, the true stories, the stories that only those parents could tell. And I think that was really became a part of, and just a very important part of what the work that we've been doing and what we've been able to continue to do is listening to those stories from those communities about how we can improve education for their children. You know, we've always had that holistic philosophy on education and training. So and we believe that, and you know, sort of our ethos has always been that it's a lifelong process, education. So, you know, it's from early childhood right through primary, secondary, you know, TAFE, adult education, tertiary education, the whole, you know, sort of the whole gamut of that. And because we recognise that, you know, the influence that the social and economic circumstances that have on individual families and communities, and access to fair and equitable education and training improves the lives of our children, the lives of our family, and it does. I just want to say that we talked about the community organisations with members from across the communities. We talked about our networks. We talked about, you know, who we represent on behalf of, and it's talked about our structures. And it's really important to just, I think, to I can't get the word out, but accentuate the work of the LAECGs. Their work in their communities has been very important. And Mark mentioned some amazing women that had really fought really hard during those processes, and for that work to continue. And it's still, you know, a priority that we need to ensure continues. Well, you know, what we do is we ensure that we place the Koori learner at the centre of all of our policy and all of our decision making, and we believe that those students provided with strong support and service are going to achieve their educational and training aspirations. we were really fortunate that we did end up with the Worawa Aboriginal Education Plan, the first of its kind, actually, in the state. It was a 10-year plan. Remember, plans would only be for a 3 or 4 year cycle, an electoral cycles. But we were able to get one that was 10 years old. That would last us for 10 years. So it was a unique plan. As I said, the first in the nation, actually. I know that other states have done it, but it was through, we were the first, and we were the first to ensure that we did get that plan in place for 10 years, because we wanted to see and ensure that it would improve, you know, that it assisted in ensuring that we had a critical role to play in closing the gap between Koori and non-Koori communities, families and learners. And we think that Worawa has made a really strong contribution to our goals. Similarly, with the Warwick strategy, that's based in self-determination and support for the Koori community. So that's to be involved in the development of sustainability of higher and further education within our communities. I just want to give you a little bit of a bit of history about Warwick and how it came into being, because it is really interesting what we were doing. And I can remember being in charge of an adult education, further education with the TAFE Institute, and the programs that we were offering our students. And it was really good. We wanted them to be part of education. They would learn about education, but they were not programs that were going to lead to careers. They were not programs that were going to lead to jobs. They were not programs that were going to make sure that we were increasing, you know, the economic value to our community. And so there were lots of, and don't get me wrong, they were really great programs. It's got people interested in wanting to do education. They were arts and crafts. They were, you know, language teaching programs. There were cultural programs. There are a whole range of other things. But with Warwick, what we decided, what we really needed to see is we needed to see that we were providing programs within our TAFE institutes and our adult and further education institutes, that there would be certificate courses, certificate 1s, certificate 2s and certificate 3s that were going to lead to employment, and it was structured at programs that would ensure that people would get employment that was connected to their communities. And that was the beginning of our Warwick strategy, and our Warwick strategy has grown. It's grown so big, and we owe it to our general manager here for that, but it has. But we, you know, we advocate Koori learners, and still advocate in those fields, adult and community and further education, in apprenticeships, in registered training organisations, and we have 3 in the state that we work with and that we support, and they are very successful. If you want to see, and you should have had a look, it'll go through and look at Baxel's graduation ceremonies. The people that graduate from those those certificate 4 and diploma courses from that registered training Aboriginal organisation, which was a dream of ALPS, that those people, it makes you think about all the hard work that you put into education, and we were getting there because we're getting those young people through those. So, you know, that's just really important. We also I also want to talk to you about one of the other programs that we were able to do is we were able to create the Career Academy of Excellence, which is our KAE, and we worked with a regional director here in out the northern suburbs of Victoria, and looking at a program that we thought, and you know, excellence is excellence is a word that sells, you know, excellence has those connotations that you're going to get really great things. So that's why it was called the Academy of Excellence. But what we did get out of that is we did get excellent students. We ran a program for those children that wanted to, you know, there was a really streamlined process for them to enter. They had to be committed. They had to be ensured that what they wanted to do was continue with their education. They wanted to, you know, they had to prove they wanted to be a part of that program and participate in that program. But one of the things, and I just want to say this, all along the way, in all educational things that we do, one of the most important things is you don't give up your culture at the expense of education. So within that program, it was providing cultural programs as well. And that's what we see, and that's what we've done at BIO all along the way. So, and we've had, you know, we've had high achievers come from that Career Academy of Excellence that have gone on to university. We have. One of our other programs that we're really proud of was Worawa Manong. Now that, and Mark would probably talk more about this than me, but you know, it's about ensuring that career learners are supported to enter higher education, and you know, sort of that they're well equipped and they're prepared to learn. And and the work that Mark has done for VAI in relation to that program has been really excellent. No matter, Mark will tell you this, is that no matter what your ATAR score is, if you have done and completed year 12, we will get you into a university. And he has been able to achieve that. I want to tell you about a young man comes from a little town called Barmer, you know, population 200 people, went to Echuca High School, but did his BCE, year 12, broke his leg. He couldn't continue at school. But what did he want to do? He wanted to do law. But you know what? He didn't get a very good ATAR score, a very poor ATAR score. So he came to us, Worawa Manong, and he asked his father actually came to see me and said, is there any way you can help? And I, of course, said, yes, I've got someone who could do the job for you. And it was Mark. And what we were able to do was get him into a university. It wasn't the university of his choice, but it was into a university that then enabled him to go to a university of his choice. He completed his law degree and he's now working for some very high prestigious judge in the justice system somewhere. So that's Worawa Manong for you. That was and that's just one story of so many others that Worawa Manong has been able to help. So, but that's you know, they're the things that we've been doing. Yeah, we've had key projects. We've got a partnership working collaboratively with the Victorian Schools Building Authority, and that work includes, you know, bringing together key career voices for the planning stages through the construction of all new Victorian school builds and major upgrades to existing schools here in Victoria. So what we've been able to do is, you know, I think, and you've probably been able to have read in the paper about the new schools having Aboriginal names or having Cree names. And that's what we've been able to achieve as being a part of that program. And what we want to see within that program, that those schools reflect our culture. They reflect it. So our kids can see when they enter those schools and go to those schools that it's not only for their academic learning, but it's also about learning about their culture. I might let Lionel continue, or Mark. I think I've talked too much, and I think that they should have a say.
Yeah, I should probably earn my keep and ask a question at some point as well. But I mean, in particular, and I think we've just had education in action, so thank you, Aunty Jerry. In terms of that history and growth of VAI and the important work that it's done, I mean, Uncle Lionel Given it will be the 50th anniversary in 2026 of AI, the establishment of AI, and reflecting on that growth that both you and Aunty Jerry have mentioned, and particularly you mentioned the growth to 46 staff and 32 LACGs, what are your reflections on how the role of AI has developed and grown over the past 48 years?
Probably, look, I'll ignore my notes. I'm pretty bad at reading my notes anyways. But reflection on the growth of AI. We started off in a small way, but it's grown. And it needs to grow more in the sense that the only way we're going to, people keep mentioning close the gap and parity, right? Well, the only way you're going to achieve that is growing a greater community voice and family input, because it comes back to the community and the family in supporting their children into an education, but not their children, themselves as well. We have a growing number of adults in adult education at present and through the TAFE system as well, and going into universities now. So what we've got to look at is how we actually capture that and go forward. But what the key to that is actually that community voice and the community input into it. At the moment, we have 32 LACGs. They are voluntary bodies, and sometimes it's a struggle. We have people employed to actually support those 32 LACGs and through their functionality. But also at the same time, we actually need to look at how we strengthen that and grow that, because we want those LACGs, local Aboriginal education consultative groups, right, to not only interact with their community, but interact with the local kindergartens, the local daycare centres, the local schools, the TAFE colleges, and the higher education, the secondary schools. So to assist those students going through. That's the role of our LACGs. That's vital and important to the structure of the organisation. And probably that's our greatest strength, is to build on that. And we need probably greater support in that area to actually do that, and actually to grow that voice and grow that community input. We've developed a structure. I probably should return to some of my notes. We have developed a structure that enables our community to participate and to have a voice, all right? Where once we become incorporated, we develop those LACGs. Then we put a body in place called the Committee of Management, which is now changed to the Victorian Representative Council, all right? That's those 32 LACGs and other community members coming to the table, right, and talking about the needs and wants of their local community in regards to education and training. When we mention education, we also got to tie it to that training, all right? And so that's what's happening at present. So we have the 32 LACGs coming together at the VRC, Victorian Representative Council. In fact, I've got a meeting next week with that. And so that's chaired by Geraldine and Mark when he returns, right? That will actually look at actually growing the way the community participates across the board in education and training. Although we're achieving it, and we're saying that we're achieving numbers and getting numbers through, and we are. But also there's still a gap. There's still a gap that we have to address. During an international pandemic, we had 100% enrolment rates in kindergarten in the state of Victoria, 2 years running, all right? Last year, again, we had 100% enrolment rates in kindergarten, all right? So when I keep talking about close the gap, we smashed that gap in those years. But that's about enrolments. That's not about participation. So what we've got to look at is how we actually then come back to participate, to go to the family, to get the family's voice involved, and the family's planning and involvement in their little darlings going to those local daycare centres, right? Because that's your building block. That's your building block if you want to go through the schooling system, you want to go into the TAFE, diploma, higher education, that's your building block. And that's what we're looking to do, and we're looking to achieve that. And that's happening to a large degree. And we will continue to do that. So that's the LACGs. The LACGs are really vital in growing that voice. And I know that, people got a bit sick of the title, The Voice, because we got outvoted, right? But the reality is you've got to have community participation and community's voice in any planning matrix going forward, or what's the use of an Aboriginal voice otherwise? And that's reality, right? We are growing the numbers, and I think VAI is good proof of that, right? But also it leads to other things that has to happen, and that's in the health sector, across the whole spectrum of life, really. And so we need to look at how we do that. All dimensions of education training, this is the title I have here. VAI places a Koori learner at the centre of all education policy and decision making, and we do. Right? We believe that students provided with strong support and service will achieve their educational and training aspirations. But it's about providing that support, and that's coming from an organisation. But it's not only, we don't work in isolation from other community organisations. We work in conjunction and in partnerships with those organisations, and also the education system in a lot of cases. Right? But also at the same time, we've got to look at how we actually continue that support for a student going into those learning environments, right? The Worawa Aboriginal Education Plan, we've spoken on that, 2016 to 2026, coming to the end of its tenure. Right? It's a unique 10-year plan, and it is, and it sets the community up to have that voice at the table, right? So that's that voice at the table at the local level, at the kindergarten. For the TAFE system, for you to have a Worawa strategy in your TAFE college, the TAFE college has to get support from the local community and agreement, otherwise it won't be funded. That's a ministerial decision that's been made, and we work with the system to make sure that happens, right? So that's about that self-determination that's right across the spectrum. So it's in schools. Geraldine spoke on the KAE in the schooling system, the Worawa Education Plan that supports students going into school, but not only supports the student, supports the school to interact with the community and the parents. Education obviously has a critical role to play in closing the gap between Koori and non-Koori. I sometimes don't like that close the gap business, but that's families and learners. Worawa has made a strong contribution to this goal, and it will continue to do so. Similarly, the Worawa strategy is really vital and important.
Can I just interrupt you? I'm sorry for a minute before you move on and leave the Murrung.
Yep.
On page 34 of Murrung, there's a targets and measures.
Yes.
And I just wondered what's been the outcome measured against those targets. Do you have that in front of you?
Not in front of me, no.
Might help if I give you
a copy of it.
I think we should be able to bring it up on page 34 of the
turn
Worawa
over the
Aboriginal
other.
Education Plan.
Yeah.
This is in the next 5 years, over the next 10 years. Those education state school targets.
Yep.
Yep. 25% more year 5 students will reach the highest level of achievement in reading and maths. And I think we're on track to do that, but we've still got a way to go. Obviously, a long way to go. One other thing too that's played a role in this, a negative role in all this, is actually COVID, right? But it's not only the effects of the COVID years themselves, but the fallout from that. So people have been reluctant to actually further engage. Go back to what I said originally. For a student to achieve it, you have to have the support from the family and caregivers, because a lot of our children are in out-of-home care, caregivers as well, right, to actually support their achievement. Now, for that to occur, they've got to have a voice in the matrix of education. And we will build on those numbers. When you consider I know I always throw back this, that, you know, we had 2 Year 12 graduates in the whole state back in 85. That's a phenomenal growth. But we want to do better. We've got to do better. And we're getting people through into TAFE, to diploma courses, we're getting people into degree courses, into doctorates now. There's one on the board there in the moment, Mark Rose. So you have people who are doctorates, but also at the same time, there is still a long way to go in those spaces, and our community have the basis to do that. I don't know if that's answered your questions fully.
Are you able to run through those dot points and sort of give your reaction to each of them?
Over the next 10 years, 25% more than that point you're saying?
Yeah, given that we're nearly at the end of the 10 years.
I think that's something that we're going to have to sit back and consider across the breadth of the program, breadth of the strategy, right? Because at the moment, I'm sitting here, all of a sudden you spring on me this, right? And I think we need to go back and actually look at that and look at how we actually work through the matrix of bringing that all together, all right? Okay, and we will do that. And that's something that's going to happen.
Sure. I didn't mean to.
Planning. That's part of the planning for the next iteration of Worawa. And we've actually been raising it with the current Minister for Education and current Minister for Training and the current Minister for Early Childhood, because you've got 3 ministers we have to relate to. And we're talking with them about the next iteration of what we want looking to go forward. We don't want to return back to a plan that's the duration of the life of government, right? So in the past, you only could plan for election cycles, and we're going to get away from that. And that's why we moved to Worawa for a 10-year strategy, okay?
10-year strategy, so we don't know which government's going to be in, you know, 4 years' time.
Yep.
Would you, like meet with, why we have bipartisan support?
Yes.
So
Yes.
talk us through some of that stuff.
It's just a matter of dialogue, basically. I mean, we have a relationship with both sides of government, because you have to. When, as you said, it made a statement saying that you don't know who the next government will be. So we need to actually have a dialogue with the opposition, as they're currently called. Right?
Yeah.
And we will do that. And we know who the Shadow Minister for Education is, and we will go and meet the Shadow Minister for Education and the leader of the opposition as well. Right? Whether we like it or not, they are people that will be voted in and who set a policy framework around education that we have to actually look at dealing with, and we will.
And thank you.
Commissioner Lovett, sorry, if you could turn your mic on.
Already done.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
don't worry, yeah.
thanks.
I saw them in the background. Funding though, adequate funding. Do you feel government's committed adequate funding for the 10-year strategy? I know in the last budget that we just got announced a couple of weeks ago, I think it was something like $30 million.
51.
There you go, 51. Good. You're across it. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, 51 million. But over the lifespan of the 10-year strategy, have government in your view, invested, or the organisation's view, invested enough in Aboriginal education?
In a systemic way, yes.
Okay.
Right. And by what I mean by that is by the schooling system, right? And we have a relationship not only with the state schools system, we have a relationship with the Catholic school system and the independent school system as well, because they're our children, whether they go into each one of those areas, right? So we've got to look at how we actually do that when we have ongoing relationship with those groups and to do that. The other one then is about, that's the systemic buy-in, right? But then what you're talking about is over the top of that. And we're not quite sure what that $51 million is targeted for, but there will be some ongoing meetings that we will have with relevant ministers in relation to that, because we see it's vital for Worawa to continue, right? And not only continue, but to strengthen. Because what we've got to look at, go back to what I was saying about buying getting community buy-in and family buy-in. That is vital. That is the key ingredient. And how do you do that? At the moment, we don't have the mechanism, we do have part of the mechanism, but probably not to the greater degree we'd like, to be able to go out and meet individually with a lot of those folks to actually get their views and what is currently needed to their child's education and training.
And can I ask just a question from your submission? You said here that remnants from the explicit segregation of the education system in the 19th and early 20th century can still be found in compulsory and non-compulsory education, and that Koori learners are often placed at an unfair disadvantage.
Your microphone isn't the best, unfortunately.
Yeah, so just you talk about the remnants of exclusion and segregation that happened in the 19th
Yes.
and early 20th century, and how remnants of that can still be found in schooling today.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about what that looks like?
It's basically called racism,
Right.
to be quite honest. But look, and we know it exists. We know it's out there. We deal with it. As an Aboriginal person, we deal with it every day. But not only that, we've got to look at how we actually assist our community to deal with it and systemically deal with that sort of stuff, right? And we're doing that. And that's why you enter into a partnership. You don't enter into a partnership lightly. We don't enter into a partnership because we want to be a partner with non-Aboriginal government. We enter into a partnership for a simple reason that allows us to walk through the door, to go and talk to the systems about the need for greater education involvement from our community, right? In a dual way. One is around changing the curriculum so that there is the recognition of Aboriginality, right? And the other then is also about the individual's growth patterns that can occur. Right?
Can I just,
I don't know if that addresses what you said.
Yes. Yeah.
Does?
Okay. I was going to say that when you talked about, because I can remember being at school, in primary school, long time ago, seems like a million years ago. But we did have, I can remember having a segregated class. There was a segregated class for Aboriginal students in that school, in my primary school, that they placed the Aboriginal kids in. Now today, there are some people that might say that there's still segregation happening, because what they're going into is they're segregating our kids into schools that are called PLOs, flexible learning, out whatever comes.
Yeah.
And that's where they send our kids who they see who have behavioural problems, who have, sort of those sorts of things happening. And that's where our kids, that's segregation. It's still happening. So it has to stop. What needs to happen is in those schools, things need to be working with those kids so that they can return to that mainstream school. It shouldn't be somewhere that they just shut them up and leave them there. There has to be work that has to be done so they can integrate them back into those other schools. So that's still happening, Maggie. So things like that haven't changed. They just call them different names, or, sort of different, I don't know, different systems or whatever. But it does happen. And what we need to do is we need to ensure that, and it comes up. Don't worry, we get, you go to a Delta committee meeting, or you go to a Justice Committee meeting and they'll talk about racist schools, or they'll talk about a whole range of things with us and complain, and things that they want that need to be done. And then we'll take, and usually I'm the one that'll sit there, and I take it back to our VRC, back to our committee of management, and say, these things are happening, and what we have to do is we have to deal with them. So what we have to do is we have to, and it is about building those partnerships, and it is about building relationships. There are things that, that can't talk about at the moment that have been occurring, but in relation to some racist incidents. But we've been working with the department on them, and there's actions being taken. So that does happen, and what we want to do is advocate and make sure that there are consequences for those actions.
Are there any?
Also, before you go on, just in response to that as well, since the failure of the Voice referendum, right, there's been a real growth out there in a lot of our communities in regards to racism issues, especially in around schools, outside of schools, and it's happening, and we know it, and our community comes back and tells us about that. There are things that we have in place that not only we, I'll go back to what I was saying originally. That's why we entered into a partnership. In the Department of Education, there are people employed in dedicated Aboriginal positions in the department, right, in different levels, right, and also in the TAFE system that actually are able to actually work with the system to actually change a lot of that around. Geraldine then touched briefly on something that is occurring and that we will deal with. But to deal with that, we also have got to bring into play that partnership, and we've got to bring into play those Aboriginal workforce members to actually deal with those matters, right? Because we don't want our children out there being racially abused. We don't want our children out there being discriminated against. And so that's what we're doing. But also, we were talking about the levels of education. Well, I think this woman sitting here is a really good example. When we were growing up, back in the day, Aboriginal people were not allowed to go to a high school. You went to a secondary school that either trained you for menial labour, right? Boys' technical school, which I had to go to, and also Geraldine and Esme, who now both lead Aboriginal organisations and was the chair of the treaty group, right? Were only allowed to go to the girls' school because they could then learn how to cook and become menial slaves or labour. Sorry, not slaves. Okay, but that's education has changed in that degree. But what we've got to look at is actually changing it more. Okay, sorry.
Commissioner North, were you going to ask?
I was going to ask, after we finish this hearing, if you've got an example or two of the sort of racist behaviour that you've come across and how it's been handled, it could be very useful for our report.
Okay.
You can send in writing afterwards, just to give us a bit of a flavour of the sorts of things that you've dealt with and what the outcome's been and what the process has been, because it sounds like it's been a useful process.
Yeah. Because look, just recently I've had a phone call from a regional director, and you know the education system is you've got the secretary and you've got DepSecs and then you've got regional directors.
Yeah.
I've had a phone call from a regional director about a racist incident, right, or two, and we're going to have meetings about it and putting in place strategies to address those matters. So the hierarchy within the education system are actually moving on that. That won't happen unless you have a strengthened relationship, and that's what I would highly recommend that we actually look at actually strengthening up. All right?
Strengthening up how?
Strengthening up the partnership arrangement, not only a partnership arrangement, but the power for the Aboriginal voice within the whole matrix of things. All right?
And talking about that,
Mark, Professor Rose wants to speak.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say that if we had to rely on data coming from the state government, that would be about 12 months away. If we're relying on data from the federal government, that's 2 years away. But at VAI, if something happens in a school today, it will be known at VAI by 5 o'clock. It's real-time data, real fast, and VAI will be on the case, advocating and defending and looking into those issues. So the racism whether it appears covertly or overtly, VI is essential to dealing with it in real time and real fast.
I just wanted to say, and it reminded me, Lyle, talking before about another incident, and it was something that he had to fix in relation to racism and bullying and fighting within school. And it was about his expulsions and things. And he was, there were things we couldn't fix. Department has particular rules and things like that. But there were alternatives that we could look at. There were alternatives that we could bring into play that would make sure those children who were not being expelled didn't have anywhere to go or just dropped out. But looking at alternatives for them to where we could fit them and where they could go. So those are the sorts of things that VI has been able to do. But about looking at the system, what you need to do in relation to it is look at there are things that there are things that are in play that and Lionel will know more about them than me, but sort of why there aren't expulsions, why there aren't suspensions, why there can't be so many suspensions, and why there has to be alternatives like keep a child at home, those sorts of things. So, they're the sorts of things that you need to look at. They're the sorts of things you need to change.
And just on some of the things that need to change, if I can bring up page 15 of the Morung strategy, which shows the plan overview, including the key system enablers and the focus on excellence in teaching, learning and development in each area of learning, it being early childhood, schools and higher education and skills. So if we can just zoom in on the two tables there, and this might be something, Mark, that you're able to speak to. One of the particular issues that is highlighted in a number of aspects of the strategy is regarding curriculum development and VI's advocacy and work on that issue with the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority. And I just wondered if, Mark, you could describe why curriculum development is important and what type of curriculum development is required.
Thanks, Tim, for the question. Through my role at VI, I hold a place on the board of the Victorian Curriculum Assessment Authority. I sit on the board of Council of Deans of Education across the nation, and I also, up to very late, chaired the Indigenous Advisory Group at ACARA. And what we have always said at the table at VI, going back to when I first wandered into VI, just on 30 years ago, that our kids were silent and mute in the curriculum. And that silence has disadvantaged our kids, but has also disadvantaged the general population. The curriculum that comes out of the CARA comes to the VCAA, then out to the jurisdictions, has now been we moved from a whitewash curriculum into one that's got colour, tone and context, and all kids are the beneficiaries of that. So it's about teaching our kids and making our kids be able to be seen and heard in the curriculum. But as a nation, one of the insidious things about the Education Act of 1872 and before that, the Aborigines Protection Act of 1869, was the fact that it was like a snake biting itself. Why they moved to have us extinguished, it cut non-Indigenous people off from the cultural heritage of the land they live on. So when the Adelaide Declaration came about, followed by the Melbourne Declaration and Indigenous perspectives in the curriculum, we got all excited, but then the kids that were taught in that year are now just entering teacher training and will come back having had 12 years of Indigenous perspectives at different levels in their student journey. But one of the transgenerational and vestiges of non-Indigenous people knowing very little about Indigenous perspectives, which has added to the disadvantage across the nation, is the fact that teachers for a very long time knew very little about how to apply the Indigenous perspectives as they exist. It means that our curriculum is rich and full, right? And the work of VAI has benefit not only Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids, but all kids are the beneficiaries of the work from VAI.
And you raise a good point there. So if curriculum development has been fulsome and the tools are available to teachers in regards to the development of the curriculum, that still ultimately requires the teachers to have the tools to be able to teach that material. On that issue, do you have any reflections on teacher education itself and the capacity of teachers to be culturally capable to be able to teach the curriculum that VAI has assisted to develop?
I certainly do. And without getting too political on it, I was very excited when the ACEL standards came out, and I thought that was great. But I would argue it's time to revisit them and perhaps add a couple more standards, and then for the Victorian Institute of Teaching to take those standards a bit more seriously in the application of licensing to teach. I say this in a very precarious time because there's a worldwide shortage of teachers, and anyone with a pulse and an education qualification can have a job at the moment. But we need to make sure that there are higher standards in teacher registration around Indigenous, and the sector is calling out for it. Everywhere you go, non-Indigenous teachers say that they are the outcome of being deprived of Indigenous perspective in their own personal education. At universities, we're trying to imbue all subject areas with Indigenous perspectives, but it's a slow drip feed arrangement. And I would argue if there were a couple more standards that were a bit more cutting edge, and that auspicing accreditation bodies took them more seriously, rather than have an Aboriginal critique to it and get your tick for Indigenous, I'd like to see it a bit more rigorous.
What can I ask? You mentioned the standards there. What are the other strategic hooks for us to be able to make systemic changes in that area?
Well,
around curriculum and all that kind of stuff. We're in 2024 now. Sorry, we're talking over each other.
I know. The maroon policy is the best policy I've ever seen, and I must admit, without admitting to plagiarism, the frameworks of that I applied in the Deakin strategy, Indigenous strategy. So those hooks are great as drivers, but to become a teacher, you need registration. There's separate accrediting bodies. VCAA is terrific in the work that they do, and they meet regularly with us. And as I said, I sit on the board. There is an Academy of Teaching and Learning that exists in the state. I would like to see them work with seasoned teachers to build up their schools a lot more. And I hope that the work of universities in preparation is more cutting edge than it has been in the past, that teachers emerging from teacher training courses or initial teacher education courses are given the best and the tools to equip. But nothing is better. From the national curriculum, we talk about the martini glass, which is a bit funny to talk about. It's very late at night, and the martini should be the last thing on my mind. But we start with a big topic, such as stolen generations, and we ask teachers to funnel it down to a place-based response. If we're talking stolen generations, and you're talking Geelong. Well, Geelong had 12 orphanages, so that's so the work of the LAECGs in giving that tone and texture to the drivers of curriculum is vital.
Thank you.
I wanted to quickly discuss, and this goes to some of the questions that were being asked before about the governance arrangements for Morang. That's on page 33 of the strategy. And if we can just focus on the top half of the page. So there's a governance structure that involves the LAECGs and Koori Education Roundtables chaired by VAI, regional partnership forums co-chaired by the Department of Education and VAI, the Morang Governance Committee co-chaired by the Department Secretary and by you as President, Aunty Jerry, and then that reports into the Education State Board. And then there's an annual ministerial roundtable. I was just interested on your reflections on how that governance structure has worked in practice over the past 8 years, and in particular things that have worked and potentially things that government can do better to strengthen those arrangements.
A lot of that actually comes back to our own planning from a community viewpoint, in the sense that when you mentioned the Koori Education Roundtables, I came up with that idea at a forum in Echuca, and the idea was because when LACGs were first formed, in our local communities, really it was provided the only platform for communities to have a voice. There was nothing. There was no co-ops, local co-ops, and other local committees. So but that's now grown, where you have Aboriginal cooperatives everywhere across the state. You know, not everywhere, but in most centres across the state, you have growth of local committees. So the call on the Aboriginal voice is out there, but also at the same time, what we've got to be, if you're going to have input from a community viewpoint, you need to include everyone. Self-determination is about including everyone, right? And the idea of having the community sitting at the table, and that was the whole idea. So although VAI chairs that committee, it invites right across the board any group in that jurisdiction or that area, local area, to come to the table to share their view on what's needed in education for themselves, their community, their children and their families. And that's the whole idea of that structure. And if you have a look at the structures that we have, you just mentioned them, the LACGs, Koori Education Roundtables, the joint partnerships at the regional level, chaired by LACG representatives and the regional director, who is a very senior person, and involve all the senior management in that regional office, right? And there's 4 regions in the whole state, right? And then the senior one, the Central Governance Committee, co-chaired by Geraldine and the Secretary, right? So you have the community's input right across the whole spectrum, and that's what that is about, okay?
Within that Central Governance Committee, there's all of the Victorian state governmental people are represented. So if they have, they have high positions within those departments, then they sit at our table at our central governance, so they contribute. As we said, education is holistic, and as I take into consideration all of those other issues as well. So we have people like from justice, through health, through all of those government departments. They sit at our governance, our central governance roundtable. So they're all represented, and not only that, but the statewide Koori organisations, their representatives also sit at that table as well. So we all discuss all of issues that are, pertinent to education at that table. That's going to impact maybe from their departments to our department, to the education departments. So they contribute. So it's the process along the way. That's what our process is within that diagram. And then when it's the ministerial roundtable, that's when the minister gets to hear but it is. It's happening, so that he knows what's happening on the ground within our regions, within our schools. And it comes through that process.
And an element of the strategy makes clear that part of the governance framework has been established to ensure that government is held accountable by the local communities involved and by VAI as well as the peak body. And the strategy mentions that, and the accountability framework requires a succinct and focused set of performance measures. This is on page 32 for commissioners. In the third paragraph, and the capacity for relevant data and information to be provided to local communities to better inform conversations about progress to date and forward action, and a mechanism for feedback from communities. Do you feel as though there has been from government the appropriate amount of data sharing to allow to inform local communities about the performance of government against the strategy?
Do you really want me to answer?
I think Mark said
The
it.
truth-telling commission.
I think Mark said it first on
Yeah,
on
sure.
screen
Yeah,
before.
Mark, if you.
No, when he said it
Oh,
before
sorry, yes,
on the
sorry.
screen, saying in the data that we tend to be able to get is usually 10 months or 12 months old, right? From a state level. From the Commonwealth level is normally 2 years. So you're working in arrears, really, because that data is 12 months old. Right? But also at the same time, it is a planning, it allows a planning block, right, that you're able to utilize. But it would be far better if we could have real-time data, right, as you progress. But I don't think they, through their structures, the way education system is structured, that they can actually obtain real-time data in that fashion, right? So it'd be good if they could, but yeah, probably. And Mark stated that before on when he made a presentation.
I think it's really important. I think that that's one of the things that we need, and I think that we've always needed, and it's been hard to get, really, is real-time data. And that, when we talk about that data, that's our data. That's our sovereign data. We should have access to that data, because that then informs how we do and how we operate our programs and how we can improve and make improvements. So that's why I said, did you really want me to answer?
And Mark, did you have anything to add? I saw you nodding.
I'm just in total agreement. But in the era of dashboards, I don't envisage that in the future that will be a problem, that we'll be able to have a direct feed from a centralised dashboard from the department. But the point I made before, that if something does happen, we hear about it real quick, real fast at VAI, and we can respond to issues ahead of data and ahead of processes. So the VAI decision is really rich and dynamic. But I would hope to see some more interactive dashboards going forward, maybe in Maroon too.
Yeah, and on that, which was going to be really my last question on the strategy. What are some of your key desires for the next strategy, if there is to be one, given that Maroon finishes in 2026? That's an open question to anyone if anyone wants to answer.
I think what Mark talked about earlier, and I think that's really important. And I think that with what we need to look at is about that initial teacher training. I think that what we need to do is ensure that we either have to grow our own, or what we do is we have to ensure that those teachers that are going to graduate from those universities and go into teaching our schools are very much aware of the children that they're going to be teaching. And that's our children. our Aboriginal, and not only Aboriginal, but our Torres Strait Islander children that live here as well. So I think that's one of the really important things is that initial teacher education training is something that we should look at. And I think that we have a place with because we do, Lionel said earlier, we work with 3 ministers of education. We work with early childhood training and the Department of Education. So I think that we have an opportunity with those 3, working within those 3 areas, to then influence what comes next in our next strategy. It's going to improve our next strategy to ensure that we get that data, to ensure that what we do is we are getting from early childhood, we're getting our children into schools that are ready for them, that are ready for them. Okay, that they're no good looking at them and saying, are they school ready? Are the schools ready for them? That's really important. So that's what we need to be making sure of. We need to be making sure of that our children are able to be comfortable in their skin, are able to identify as Aboriginal students and be proud to stand up and say who they belong to and where they come from. So in that classroom, you know, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, that's really important. Those are the foundational levels. What we need to be able to do is ensure that we have our kids, so that you mentioned, you know, you talked about the year 9. Year 9 is always, I've worked in school, I know it's been right. I know some schools that have deliberately built schools separate for year 9 students. They have. So that's a real problem area. But what we need to do is we need to be able to make sure that wherever our kids are or wherever they go, that, you know, they are being, you know, that they're able to access school freely, that they're able to feel wanted in that school, that they're able to relate to that school, that school is engaging with them, that school is also teaching them, you know, teaching them, not just having them sit in the classroom, but being sure that they're, you know, that they're developing year by year by year by year. That's what should be happening with all of our kids, that we have that, and that we have the data show that that's happening, so that we can say, yeah, our kids are progressing really well through. So I think there are lots of things that what we can do within the next Maroon strategy. I think that the things that we've learned over these last 10 years, and what Lionel said before, we'll have at that 10-year period, we'll have that data from Maroon that's going to assist us in informing our next strategy and how we make it work better for our students, how we make it better for all sectors of education.
Can I jump in? How in a shared future, we talk about a shared future through, you know, truth and treaty, how do we keep government accountable for what they commit to? So there's a lot of onus on Aboriginal organisations, yous in particular, but others who have come forward around a deeper level of accountability where, you know, our people are on the ground, we hear from them, but government don't seem to be at a lot of the other tables and being accountable for the delivery of their side of the strategy. So what does that look like? Any thoughts on that?
I think, you know what I think? I think that we've worked really hard over the years, AI, you know, over 40-something years. What we've learned to be able to do is develop relationships, and not just with one particular party or the other, but develop those relationships in relation to what's best for the education of our children and what's best that will work for them. Not, you know, sort of it's how you want to reach your goals, and it's how you want to build relationships with people that are influential to be able to ensure that you do. I think look, I'm not talking about any other organisation. I don't know, you know, how they operate. That's their business.
I'll ask everyone the same question. That's how I start
Okay.
asking.
I'm just telling you that what I've learned, and I've learned from some very, 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 very good people. I've had some really great mentors, and following their lead and being shown how you operate and work with people, that's, I think, is what happens. I think that's how you do it. It's no good, you know, like, can lose my cool sometimes, but what's the point? You know, sometimes you've got to make sure that the point that you're raising is in fact one that is going to make a difference, one that you really feel passionate about, and that you know yourself is going to get that difference.
I'm really interested in this point because I wonder if it relates to the length of the Marong period of the program, because my experience, and it hasn't been in education, but my experience of government is that there is an enormous churn. And so I'm sort of amazed to hear that you've built up relationships where the picture is in generally dealing with government. You're dealing with one DepSec in, you know, for 6 months, and then they go off, and then someone else comes in, or an ED who's there and then gone. And of course, it's really disruptive. But you seem to have got a dynamism with the relationships. How do you navigate the churn, or isn't there churn in
It's the policy.
the
It's the
policy?
structured policy. Individuals come and go, right? And they do always do. A DepSec will be transferred to a region, they'll go. Someone else will take their place. The community remain, the systems remain, but you've got to have the structures to enable you to have a voice at the table to actually look at those dialogues. That's one of the main, and that's what we're also hoping, and probably part of the response to your question too, is that we're hoping that, and you're saying that we have that structure and all that, and we've worked damn long and hard to develop that, but we're also hopeful that treaty will also lend to that, so that we're growing that local community voice into the processes across the board, right? Because whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's child welfare, it's all part of our life, it's part of our community. And we've got to have the families and community voice at the table to actually change that, right? Whether it's sitting at an actual table or having dialogue. And that's basically what it is, right?
And it's how you use that dialogue.
Yeah.
Really? It's how you talk about building relationships. And it is, and there is a turnover. And believe me, you get weary sometimes because you think, oh no, I have to educate another minister, or I have to educate her. But you do it. You know why you do it? You do it because you know it needs to be done. You do it because you know that the policies and strategies that we've put in place have stood the test of time. They've come from, years of hard work from all those other people we've talked about. And we intend for them to, we won't let them go because, some really good people stood behind those, and they deserve to be acknowledged for it.
Before we move on from that, because it has to do with that outcome from treaty negotiations and all of those things, and it's about cultural reaffirmation or cultural affirmation. I'm also on the Parkville School Council, right? I was recommended by the minister, so I'm on Parkville School Council, and I go to those meetings as well and interact with the folks there, plus also the young people, right? The numbers fluctuate and grow in Parkville. So November, December last year, it fell to 8 across the board, right? Parkville and also in Cherry Creek, because they've closed Malmesbury now, so you've got Cherry Creek. In January, late January, it jumped back to 30. 8 to 30. On speaking with some of those young folk in there, it's about culture and it's about cultural affirmation, right? I've spoken with a young guy in there one day, you know, he walked past me and I said, "How you going, Unc?" And he just stopped like that. He told me his entire life story, who he was, his family and that, but not his cultural framework. And in his life and his feeling, that's what's missing. We've also got to remember when we're planning all this, and part of the idea of that partnership and education is this, right? We live in the most dispersed Aboriginal population in the country in Victoria. Make no bones about that, we actually do, right? If you want to have a look at the enrolment numbers in schools, right? The majority of our children go to school, not where there's larger numbers, you know, the Shepland Tech School, or no, it's not called Tech School. No,
Super school.
Super school. Tech schools back in my day. But anyway, the individual children out in schools and families, that's a clear indication that families live out in the boondocks, right? We've got to be able to reach out into those communities. But not only if we can't reach out to them, what Mark was talking about is teacher training, so that when those new teachers come through, they're going into those schools with a knowledge base to be able to actually interact in a culturally relevant way with that student and with that family, right? So we've got to look at how we do that, and that's about cultural reaffirmation, cultural affirmation. We will do that with VAI's developing a strategy around that, which hopefully we'll be talking to, doesn't matter. But anyways, that cultural reaffirmation, because we've got to look at how we actually start connecting our children back into their cultural framework. Otherwise, folks, we're in trouble, to be quite honest. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, Mark.
Well, look, I want to echo Lionel's points about the cultural reaffirmation and so very, very important. But I also want to answer the question about the churn, that the relationship, Tony, to your question, the relationship continues because of the hard work that Lionel and Geraldine do in building relationships. You try and get in their diaries for a lunch, it's impossible. They work tirelessly. When Lionel was afforded the honorary PhD, I did a back of the envelope calculation of how many minutes, don't cut me off. How many ministers Lionel's dealt with personally? It was over 40. So the churn is there, but VAI and led by Lionel Geraldine are the permanent residents. I wonder if I could also address what should be in Marung too. I would like to look at the ecosystem that surrounds the department, the statutory authorities, etc. We know that VRQA and VCAA really do great work and relate to us, and they relate to VAI in consultation or the other stat authorities. But what I would love to see that each of those have a game changer plan each year. I'm sorry, Lionel, I'm creating more work. After saying how hard you work, I'm creating more work for you. But if they come up with a game changer strategy, an example of that would be the Alpine School of Leadership. After the first 10 years, it's a school that mirrors the private schools away for a term in year 9 that Geraldine spoke about before. The Alpine School of Leadership came to VAI after 10 years and said, how come we've only had one Aboriginal kid come through the system? And now there's a dynamic relationship. I was going to say in exile, but I'm having a sabbatical because of the stroke from being president of that school. But no Koori kid who has gone to the Alpine School has not made it to year 12. And that is kind of like the glue of, that holds, a lot of our kids together. And in that process, in that program, there is a little bit of cultural reaffirmation, but it's the frontier we need to address in the future.
No, thank you. Commissioners, those were my questions. Unless the commissioners have any. No?
Thank you.
Just leaves to thank our witnesses and the drink of water.
Thank you, Mark, for getting up early or late or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, I believe I think it's about 2 a.m. Just after 2 a.m.
Yeah.
2 a.m. I think that's.
And happy hour is over too. Can I just say that? No, well worth it. And, I just want to, and the final word, being around VI for just on 30 years, I've seen it more from a political organisation into a cutting edge policy and advocacy that has made such deliberate changes in the life of our kids, and every kid in the state is benefit from the work of VI.
Thanks, Mark.
It's if the commission pleases, what will happen is I call for a 15-minute video of Aunty Lois Peeler's evidence be played, which will be followed by a 35-minute video of Jarvis Atkinson's evidence to be played. And then at the conclusion, the hearing will adjourn for the day to resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow on the Wednesday, the 5th of June.
Thank you.
Okay. So we go? I just want to say thank you very much for listening to us. I do tend to ramble on a bit, but never mind. Thanks.
Not at all.
Thank you.
Do we get a chance to see?
So good night, everybody.
Jarvis's
Stay on, won't you? Yeah. Or it's online.
Online.
It'll be on.
Went straight on. It's going to come straight on.
online, will it?
It'd be online, yeah.
I've seen that.
From the earliest days of colonisation, the generally accepted view held by the colonisers was that the Aboriginal population would eventually die out. So it was that up until the 1960s, Australian governments held that Aboriginal children should be offered minimal schooling. This and subsequent government policies infused with racist views have impacted the ability of Aboriginal children to thrive in the sphere of education. Across Aboriginal society, we have a holistic view which refers to the physical, social, emotional and cultural well-being, and a key element in the ability of a child to thrive. And yet, when we look at the effect of past government policies, such as the Aborigines Act 1910 and the subsequent acts, regulations have had a devastating impact on many families, leading to dislocation and fragmentation in Victorian communities. One such regulation in 1916 ordered that all quadroon, octroon and half-caste lads over 18 on the board stations shall leave and shall not be allowed on the station or reserve again, except for brief visits to family at the discretion of the station manager. From the earliest days, government policies have impacted the health, social and emotional well-being of Aboriginal children and families. There are numerous stories of the negative effect of policies on families that tore families apart and prevented children from thriving. My own family story is that of my grandfather, a Yarra Yarra man, who grew up in the Corranderk Children's Dormitory. The stated aim of the education program at that time was to convert children into modern citizens through a program that combined physical exercise and outdoor labour with classroom instruction. The boys were taught to be farm labourers and the girls to be domestic servants. Their formal education stopped at grade 3 level. Once the young people reached the age of 14, they were compelled to leave and to find a job away from family and community. In 1937, the Australian Aborigines League issued a statement that read, "It is an open secret that dark children are not to receive education beyond the 3rd grade, and they are not getting it in the schools conducted by the department. We claim that our children should get the full opportunity of attaining the fullest primary education and for secondary education where the capacity is evident. Our people say that they want their children to be able to become doctors and nurses and teachers and so on, just as it has been possible for other natives of Fijian, Indian, and so on. The role and opportunity of education appears to have been well understood by many Aboriginal families. While the benefits of an education were known and desired, the increasing policy of child removal under what was called the Neglected Children's Act made sending children off to a known place at regular times a fearful activity. Families lived in fear of children being taken away. Elders recall being told to run and hide whenever they heard a motor car.
Yeah. And I'll come back now.
Many children experience broken education to stay ahead of the welfare, seeking to remove those children from their families. Our people took work wherever they could, and many families moved in search of seasonal work. They moved around to work as shearers, woodcutters, cannery workers, fruit pickers, pea pickers, tomato pickers, and tobacco workers, and more. Regardless of risks and the moving about in response to seasonal work, many families made great efforts to send their children to school. An elder recalls, "My mother and father moved quite a bit looking for work, and during my primary school years, I attended 11 schools." I authored the collection of oral histories of elders who lived on the flats between Mooroopna and Shepparton, where many recalled their memories of school. Kids from the flat would walk along the highway to the Mooroopna school. We had to walk on the highway as there were too many swaggies or transient labourers along the bush track, so we were not allowed to walk that way. We walked to school in a group, probably about 10 or 11 of us. I remember being soaking wet after walking to school in the rain. The white kids were sent home, but we had to sit there all day in wet clothes. An elder remembered when, at the age of around 7 years of age, his mother went to enrol him at the Mooroopna Primary School. The headmaster said, "We don't want you here," and slammed the door on us. That would have been around 1941. Another elder recalled that racism was embedded in the school experience. My experience at school was terrible. We had a lot of trouble there. We were treated badly and called all sorts of names. It wasn't only the kids, it was the teachers too. And one particular teacher would never give the little bottle of flavoured milk to the Koori kids.
We knew we were Aborigines and we didn't want to be anything else, although we had hard times when the children came home from school. That was the reason why we sent them away as they got older. They'd come home and say what children were calling them and how the teachers didn't help them at all when they'd go to them. They'd just tell them to run outside. So we knew we were Aborigines and we were proud of it.
Another recalled that at 5 years of age, the teacher gave her the strap because she couldn't do her sums. It was apparently quite common to be called up before the class to get the strap by the teacher for your inability to do work. The school curriculum portrayed Aboriginal people in a derogatory manner, and Aboriginal perspectives were not included. Nothing was ever permanent for our people. Men often had to leave the family to follow the work as shearers, forest workers, and families moved frequently to find seasonal work. Following the epic Cumragunja walk-off in 1939, The Barmer public school did not allow Aboriginal children into the school. This was the period of the development of Aboriginal activism. It was my dad's sister, Aunty Hillis Briggs, my sister Hillis's namesake, who established a school under a bowshed for the Aboriginal children from Cumragunja, whose families camped on the riverbank. Aunty Hillis went on to be a member of the Australian Aborigines League, along with others from Aboriginal communities across the state who fought for better conditions for our people. The Australian Aborigines League was an Aboriginal-led organisation. Established in 1933, the AAL platform cast a light on the unjust treatment of Aboriginal people and campaigned for the repeal of discriminatory legislation, enfranchisement, land rights, and representation in Parliament. A letter to the Shepparton News on the 21st of February 1946 by Uncle Shadrach James stated, "The Aborigines of this community have formed an Aboriginal Progressive Association, attended by leading Aboriginal citizens of this district. The objects of the association are to improve our standard of living socially, morally, intellectually and spiritually, to secure better facilities for improving our secondary and technical education with the possibility of entering universities. The experience of life on the flats and schooling at that time was the catalyst for the establishment of an Aboriginal school in Victoria that encompassed academic learning, health and well-being, and cultural pride to develop future leaders."
Because it was a new idea. It was a new idea in education for Aboriginals to have their very own school. And a new idea is something that people are not sure of. Will it work? Are the children going to like going to a school where they are going to be in another place away from the family? And I guess that we had to prove to them that it was workable, and so we had to do pilot projects. And after 3 years pilot project, they could see that it was going to be something that they would be proud of, to have their own Aboriginal school. And it was very difficult, I must say, in the beginning because of that new idea. There's never been another school, another Aboriginal school in the history of Victoria, actually. But now it's something where people want to send their children to. They're very proud of it.
Worawa Aboriginal College was established in 1983 to provide a holistic model of education based on lived experience of the founder Hillis Maris, and with the support of non-Aboriginal people who, under the philosophy of walking together to make a difference, supported the vision of an Aboriginal school. After 40 years, Worawa remains Victoria's only Aboriginal school, and consistent with self-determination, is registered with the Victorian Registration and Qualifications Authority as an independent school. It has not been plain sailing for this Aboriginal-led initiative, with opposition from many sectors of the community. The Worawa education model is a holistic approach. Aboriginal retention rates in education is a factor of social and emotional well-being and the continuing disadvantage Aboriginal people face in the general community. Racism remains an issue across the education sector. An incident brought to my attention recently involved a schoolyard fight where a young Aboriginal girl was bashed, which was filmed and uploaded to social media. The school did not take action, and it was escalated to higher authority. A school in another region had a similar incident but had taken no action to resolve the issue. The Eastern Regional Aboriginal Justice Advisory Committee is currently implementing Lodgebadan, a restorative justice pilot across the region. The Rajak has approached the Attorney General to change legislation from an opt-in to an opt-out process. Restorative practice, also known as group conferencing, requires the voluntary involvement of all parties, which in a school situation, voluntary involvement can be difficult to obtain. There are a myriad of reasons why, even today, our achievement in Aboriginal education, whilst growing, has a long way to go. There is no doubt that Victorian government regulations contributed to the low socio-economic position of Aboriginal people today, including family breakdown, poverty, homelessness, health, housing and education, and alienation, which in turn contribute to the low level of academic achievement and the high incarceration rate of Aboriginal people.
So my name is Jarvis Atkinson. I'm a proud Yoorrook man from Shepherd and Cumragunja. There was heaps of challenges as an Aboriginal man growing up. Starting in a mainstream school, I already felt like I had a challenge ahead of me. I felt like the teachers were already expecting me to not succeed in school. I felt like they looked at me like I was going to be a problem for them, and that their interest in helping me, progress through school wasn't there. My interest wasn't there because the school system and the teachers had no interest in me. It was a challenge for me every day just to get up and go to school because I felt like it was hard for me to ask for help. I felt like they wasn't interested in helping me. My growth and my progress in school wasn't at their best interest. They talked to us differently. The connection wasn't there. I'm a real strong observer. And as a child, I used to observe my environments a lot as well. And, it really stood out to me how other children that were non-Indigenous, how they were treated compares to how I seen my cousins get treated and how I was treated, and how he spoke to these children and then spoke to us in a different way. And, it really stood out to me. I ended up being expelled from high school, in year 8. And I actually, I got into an altercation with a teacher, and a teacher, manhandled me and grabbed me around the scruff of the neck in front of 200 students, and held me down and was screaming in my face, and I retaliated, and so I ended up being expelled. And I remember after getting expelled, my whole life changed from that day. I started engaging with people that were, I can identify with, people that were also expelled out of school, people that also found it hard to, find support and find interest in them areas. And, that led to me, hanging around people that were doing the wrong thing. I got caught up in drugs and crime. Looking back on, how the lack of support, from the teachers in the mainstream schooling was definitely plays a big factor in why, my direction in my life went the way it did. I really feel like it had a big influence on the way my life went. My first ever experience in coming into contact with the police, I was riding a bicycle without a helmet, and I remember getting pulled over, and I remember the officers, giving me a warning, but it wasn't, it was a warning in telling me to make sure I wear a helmet next time, but I knew straight away that the interaction was very passive and aggressive, and it wasn't a warning for my safety. It was a warning as if to say, don't let us come into contact with you, doing the wrong thing again, or we're going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. And I think that was one of their words at one stage was, if they catch me again without a helmet, it won't look good for me, and it was like a threat. Authorities already proved to me in the education system and growing up that they didn't have my best interests at heart, and so I was seeing authorities through a lens where they wasn't there to look out for me. They wasn't there to keep me safe. Me and a couple of cousins one night were down the street and we're getting up to no good, and a police officer pulled us over, and a lot of my cousins took off running, and I got caught by the police. And the police come up to me and grabbed me around the scruff of the neck and stood on my toes, and he was like punching me in the face, and I remember him saying to me, calling me little black this, little black that, and more or less chucking me in the divvy and taking me back to the cells. I was only probably like 16, 15, 16 at the time, and looking at the other police officer that was with him, the fact that he didn't even try pull him up and try and stop, I was almost looking to the other police officer for help, and he didn't even pull his colleague up, and that made it feel even worse. I didn't come out of it thinking I need to be very careful about doing the wrong thing. I came out of that interaction just being really cautious about, coming in contact with police again. I wasn't given no, I wasn't, it wasn't like they gave me a talk and said, this is wrong what you're doing, you shouldn't do this, you might end up like this. There was none of that. It was just, I was manhandled, I was threatened, and I just remember feeling so, like, I just grew this hatred for the police. I started to drink more, I started to experiment with drugs and marijuana, and my crime was very frequent, and I became a lot more frequently being pulled over since that first time I got arrested, because now my name was on the books. And whenever they see me, they'd pull me over. Even if I wasn't doing nothing wrong, they'd just pull me over and they'd search my pockets. Fast forward a bit and go to the first time I was actually arrested on a serious crime. I was arrested for armed robbery, and by this time I was, I was fully addicted to ice. Fully addicted to, tablets and alcohol, and there wasn't very much a drug that I didn't use at the time, and my crime was very survival. I depended on my crime to survive, and I was kept in the Shepparton cells for 28 days. And the first time I was arrested for a serious crime, I was 28. But by this time I was, I had numbers of charges. My charge sheet was getting really big, and from stealing bikes to stealing cars to drink driving to assaults and fights verbal threats and stuff like that. And at that time, you wasn't meant to be kept that long in the cells, you know. And I thought I was going to die in the Shepparton cells. And you know, it was hell. It was hell, and it wasn't a hell in terms of making me not want to do that anymore. It was just hell that I was now part of this system. I didn't have no rehabilitation. I just had more or less clean time up, you know, and I was and it wasn't long after being released where I reoffended and I was back in prison. From 2012 to 2018, I was in and out of prison every year, and I applied to go to Odyssey House Rehabilitation Centre, and I got bailed, and I was released from Port Phillip Prison and bailed to Odyssey House. And yeah, so I went to Odyssey House for 8 months, and I basically I was there for all the wrong reasons. I was there to just get out of court, and so when my corrections order finished, and I was no longer, you know, expected to stay there, I left the program, and it wasn't long after that where I reoffended and relapsed and ended up back in prison again. I really felt I really could see myself just going around in circles in this system, you know, and you know, I knew all I had to do at this time was miss an appointment and I'd end up back in prison. You know, I just had to miss one corrections appointment. I didn't even have to reoffend. I just have to miss an appointment and I'll be back in prison, you know. And that's when I started to realise that I was really at war with the system, and I was expected to navigate through this life and do the best as possible in an environment that was set up for us to fail. I couldn't see a way out, so I started to accept of this person I created through the drugs and the crime and being in the system. I was really starting to embrace this person. So there was a period of time where I was homeless for 8 years. You know, I was on the streets and I was couch surfing. I burnt all my bridges, you know, all the trust I had in my community. I went back to my mother's, and, you know, I've already made 100 promises before that, you know, I was going to really give it a try this time, Mum. And I ended up coming home to my mother's house one night, and, you know, my mother couldn't have me there no more. And I was a liability, and I was very unsafe, and she got sick of coming and seeing me in the cells, and she said she can't have me there no more. I wasn't welcome there no longer. So I ended up coming down to the city, down to Melbourne, and I ended up being homeless down here on the streets. And I was actually living down Flinders Street, and if you know Sea Life and the Crown Casino, the train track bridge that goes from Flinders to across Sea Life, and that, I was living under there. I can remember, you know, sleeping in a park and the rain coming down, and I was that exhausted and that hungry that I couldn't even move. You know, I just had to lay there in the rain, you know, and I just remember feeling so like, yeah, just so not cared about and so lost. And, you know, for 8 years I was homeless, you know, and I like I said, you know, I was 8 months on the streets of Melbourne, you know, sleeping in alleyways and out in the footpath in front of public, and yeah, just I really feel like the housing system really failed me in that time, you know. I feel like there should have been more opportunities for me to have more respite from the streets, you know, whether it was a motel here and there, whether it was some sort of respite facility, you know, especially in the regional towns, you know. There's not many places where I could go and shower, where I could go and wash my clothes, where I could go and, you know, eat something. And in this time I overdosed probably about five times. I woke up probably like 3 times in in hospital. I woke up in the Alfred Hospital twice and St. Vincent's once, and I remember the last time I overdosed, I woke up in the Alfred Hospital, and I remember waking up and looking down at my name tag, and it said unknown, and it really just shocked me, you know. And I ended up asking the nurse, how did I get here, you know? And she said, you were found face down on the train tracks at Flinders Street Station. And it really just shocked me, you know. And I remember asking God, you know, like, why am I still waking up? You know, why am I still here? And I remember thinking to myself, I could actually die right now. I could have actually died, and my children wouldn't even know where I am. My family wouldn't even know, and no one would even know who I am, you know. And but I remember thinking, a part of me knew something had to change, but a part of me felt so stuck and so out of options. I walked out straight out of the hospital. I was bare feet in the robe, pulled all the tubes out myself, the drip and all that stuff, and I just walked out, and I ended up back down on the streets. I remember going and calling my mother, and she said to me, we got some exciting news for you. We got some mail from housing, you've got a house, you know. And this was 8 years I was on the waiting list for, and I finally got this place. And I had all these good intentions, and it was a 3-bedroom place, and you know, I remember just grabbing little that I had, little red bag full of stuff, little bits of clothes that I had, and I jumped off them pylons and I went back to the train station. No money, and I jumped straight on the train and I went back to Shepparton. And I remember telling my kids and that, you know, I finally got a place for us, you know, I'm going to do the right thing now. And I had all these good intentions, you know, to do the right thing, but I was still stuck in the system. I was still a statistic, and I was still, you know, very much more than ever addicted to drugs. I wasn't just addicted to like ice and tablets and alcohol and marijuana. Now I had a heroin habit from being in the city, and it wasn't much longer where the drugs took over that place, you know. And I started opening my doors up to all the wrong people, and I ended up back down and out again, and so, you know, I felt guilt. I felt bad because I let my kids down again, and you know, I was out doing crime and that again. So I ended up committing another serious crime, another armed robbery. I knew that I was going to go for a long time because this was my second armed robbery, and my criminal history was very extensive now. And so what happened was I ended up getting caught by the police. I ended up being back in the Shepparton cells, and I remember just sitting in there defeated, you know, and accepting, and I was ready to do a long time. Like, I was starting to accept that this is my life and it's never going to change, and my fire was getting dimmer inside of me to fight to break that cycle, you know. And I remember the trap door came down in the cells, and the police officer said, "Jarvis, there's someone here to see you." I went into the visitor's box and I sat down, and a drug and alcohol worker from Odyssey House came back, and she seen me, and she said, you know, you should give Odyssey House another go. And I said, no way. You know, I knew how hard this program is, and what it would have needed, how much commitment it would have needed from me. And she said to me, do you remember when your son came and visited you in 2015, 2016? And I So in 2015, Christmas time, there was at Odyssey House, my son came and seen me. And in the front foyer, they had a wishing tree, a prayer tree. And on that tree, the visitors that came Christmas time could write a wish or a prayer and hang it on the tree. And my son wrote on a piece of paper, all I want is for my dad to stay off the drugs forever. And I sort of forgot about it. And she reminded me, you know, she said, do you remember the wish your son made, the prayer your son made? And it just broke me, you know, I just started crying, and it gave me the strength and lit that fire up in me to pick up the pen and sign the application to go back to Odyssey. And it wasn't a given that the judge was gonna bail me there. On the 1st of March 2018, I got accepted back to Odyssey House and I got bailed. And I went there and I ended up doing 3 years in this program, and I completed it, I graduated, and you know, I haven't looked back since. You know, my whole life, you know, like I said, in school where, you know, I was expected to fail and I was expected to be a problem, and I wasn't expected to make it, you know. A lot of people really didn't have hope in me succeeding in life. And you know, at times in my life, you know, people, you know, I had family members that really thought that I would never change, really thought that I would die the way I was living, you know. That was really, I had fears that they were going to bury me, you know. I had aunties and uncles say to me, you know, are we going to be coming to your funeral next? And just having someone, you know, like that drug and alcohol worker that came and seen me, and you know, I was at my lowest of the lowest, and you know, I really didn't at times I didn't think I could change. There was someone that didn't give up on me, and there was someone that was still interested enough to go out of their way to come and see me and tell me to give Odyssey another go. You know, it was so empowering at that time. I was homeless, you know, I dropped out of school early, you know, criminal record, you know, I was in all these areas, and so I was up against this person, you know. I knew when I went back to Odyssey House that I had to break down this person. I had to break down this person that I've created, that the system created. And so I knew I had to change the way I walked, I had to change the way I talked, I had to change the way I dressed, I had to change the way I thought about myself. And, you know, so it was a constant battle, you know. So I was doing all these external challenges in the house, you know, engaging in the program, using the groups. I was very committed, you know. I couldn't see the end of it. You know, I just knew that I was going to sit through whatever challenges came up against me, whatever walls I had to climb, whatever mountains I had to climb. And it was massive, you know. I knew that this was my my turnaround. I was encouraged through the whole program. I was guided, I was supported culturally, you know. We had the Boladu Naragu program once a week where we could engage in culture, and I was on my healing journey, you know. I knew that I was going to heal, you know. I was learning new life skills in there. I was learning routine and structure, and most of all, I was learning values, you know. What I had to do is I had to set myself role models within this program, and in this program there's levels in the program, you know. There's foundations, and there's level 1, and there's level 2, and there's level 3, and then there's levers, and each level has leaders, you know. And it made it possible for me to vision where I wanted to go in the program. And you know, like for example, a big role model and a big inspiration to me was the drug and alcohol worker. She actually was a resident at Odyssey House as well, and she came out the other side of it, and I guess that helped me really conceive that it was possible. There is another sense to the program where you can be influenced in the wrong way as well. So it was up to me to really identify the leaders in the program versus the people that were there like I was in my first program. So I knew the person I was in there the first time, and that was the person I didn't want to follow. You know, in this program I learnt a lot of skills. I learnt, you know, a lot of property and development maintenance skills. I learned how to, you know, I worked in the children's centre there at the program. I worked in the kitchen. I learned, you know, a lot of kitchen hand stuff, and I learned a lot of conflict resolution skills, therapy skills, you know, and a lot of just facilitation skills. And while I was in level 3, I went back and studied. So I went to uni, and I went and studied AOD, alcohol and other drugs, and I got my Cert 4 in that. And that was massive for me, you know, because I dropped out of school like in year 7, year 8, and I never ever thought I'd ever think about even going back and putting my head down and trying to study. And you know, I built up the confidence to go back to uni and complete my Cert 4. I was really supported, you know. The other people in the class, the non-Indigenous, you know, students in the class was really embracing me. They were really good. I think too, given the fact it depends what the subject is, because AOD, they know that it's a high in our people. They know they're going to be working with our people. So I really felt like their support was filtered through a lot of that as well. But, you know, I had one really close friend in there. She supported me through the whole thing, you know, and she really batted for me, and she really helped me get over, you know, where I struggled. She over time she studied with me, and she helped me get my assignments in on time, and she was really genuine, you know. And she's not Indigenous, but she's got a strong passion for our people, and I really feel like we need more non-Indigenous people like her. But it was great in there. I could embrace my story, my journey, and I was almost like an assignment for them, you know. I was, you know, like everything I was learning about was exactly me, you know, and it was just blowing me away. Like I was learning so much about myself in there as well. Just realizing how important it is to have a number of networks, and they had to be healthy networks, you know. Coming out of that environment and coming back into this environment, I really had to be aware of all my triggers, you know, people, places and things. I've got leadership roles now in my community, you know. People look up to me in my job role, and you know, all the kids, you know, call me uncle. I have so much of a desire and a passion after, you know, looking up to strong role models and leaders in community, and just to one day be able to like walk in their footsteps, you know, fill their shoes, and I feel like I'm sort of just on the tip of it at the moment, just starting to take up and play my part in that. And you know, I know I've got plenty more to do, and plenty more fights, and plenty more opportunities to lead our people. When I was studying AOD, I used to catch the bus from Odyssey House every day into Swinburne. I saw this spray paint tag on the wall, and it said treaty. And I remember just sitting on that bus every day for 6 months straight, thinking, how can I play my part? I could hear my people's voices, you know, screaming for treaty. Like, treaty, we want treaty, when do we want it now? You know, and seeing the kids, and I was just thinking, like, this fire was just building up in me, and I was just fueling it. And so for 12 months straight, I was attending all these Yana circles and events, and And it came a time where my mentor and my boss, my mentor at the time, gave me an opportunity to organise my own event back in Shepparton, back in the town where, you know, I lost respect and, you know, I had no trust, and so I said, great, you know, I embraced it. And I ended up organising my own event in Shepparton. So Stephanie Ross seen potential in me. She took an interest in me, you know, so she more or less took me under her wing. I'm an engagement project officer. I work in the metropolitan region. So my job is to organise events. I do public speaking and more or less help mob to get enrolled. All my life, people probably didn't expect me to be a winner. You know, they didn't expect me to succeed, and it comes across as a shock to them that they're so proud of me as well. But it's so empowering to people, because that's the beauty of my story, is because when all hope was lost and all trust was gone, I was able to turn that back around. No one is ever too far gone. I strongly believe that no one is ever too far gone. In the education system, I would really love to see, you know, more support for the children and more awareness on, you know, the different supports that are needed individually for each children, you know. I think just more educated teachers in the system, you know, and more genuine teachers in the system that actually want the best for our people, and just more care. And I want to hear more stories of people's experiences, you know, coming through the education system. More truth telling in the schooling systems, you know, to bring awareness to the system.